A very warm welcome to Veda. Absolutely amazing to see her and not see her just on the screen. That's fantastic, but to have her actually here is quite incredible. And thank you all. And thank you all for getting here despite the rail strike, because sadly quite a few members would have liked to have been here but couldn't because of the strike, and that's a shame, but hey. We've got Veda. She travelled, I think, at least 12,000 miles. It's an awful long way to get here, and it's just such a privilege. And Devon Dowsers is really privileged to be hosting this event. And we connected with Veda through Sean Wilson, sitting down here, back in 2020, which, if you remember rightly, we were all locked down. And Sean realised that Veda was in New Zealand and she was in quarantine in a hotel. And she had nothing better to do than provide us with a Zoom talk, which she did just like that. And it was amazing. I remember getting to the end of it and being completely speechless. It was just so awesome. And since then, we've had another Zoom, and Veda was here last year, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, which was wonderful. So we had a talk in this building last year, and here she is again. And we're so grateful you're here, but also, a big welcome to Devon, because Devon is also the home place of your mother's ancestors and your mum. And last year you had a chance to connect with where she lived, which was lovely. And we know you're really fond of Devon, and it's a little known secret that Veda has a love for Devon cream teas. And in fact, really, she's travelled 12,000 miles to have a Devon cream tea. And Sean, I think you have one there. Please accept this gift from us, Veda. It's a large cream tea, Veda. Just in case you didn't bring any lunch, okay. Okay. All of us in this room, all of you from Devon Dowsers, but the followers of Veda, we're so excited anticipating Veda's talk today. So, Veda, over to you.
Just want to make sure it's working, yep. Well, I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for coming. I know people have travelled a long way. I know that people have really made a big effort to come, to find parking, to sit for a very long time, to listen to me talk for a very long time. So if you need to go to the bathroom, please don't just I'm never going to be offended if somebody needs to get up and walk around. I know it's a long time sitting, so just make yourselves at home. That's kind of what I want you to feel, like you're at home listening to me just tell you a lot of stories. Hopefully this mic doesn't cut out too much, and I think it'll be fine. So we have a lot to share. I have spent 2 months working on presentation, and so if this does, we'll end up just using a regular mic, which should be fine. So you can see my topic is water and the ancient mysteries. So it's going to be in 2 parts. The first part is where we are establishing emotional intelligence in water. Basically, I'm trying to show you that there is some science behind what I'm doing. There is some there's a method. And so when I'm asking questions about ancient mysteries, you'll have some context for how I'm deciphering these meanings. So a lot of this is all just going to become more clear as we go through it. In the second half, I will be sharing some things that are a little bit vulnerable that I have never shared in a public live space before. So I'd love for you to hold space for me when I share them. So I will be sharing about a drowning experience that I had, and I will be sharing a little bit about something that I went through as a little girl, which is fascinating and also a little vulnerable. So I'm telling you it early because it's nice for you to be able to hold space for me whilst I do that. So the first part is going to be, well, I'm just going to get into it rather than tell you what it's going to be. So let's start. So if you wouldn't mind clicking a long one. So I have a little help up here. I'm not using my computer, so I will be just saying to move along. So I like this quote by Manny P. Hall when he says, when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. So we're talking a lot about symbols today. Okay, next please. So as I said, we're establishing that water has a kind of emotional intelligence. And I'm saying here, for clear communication, connection is vital. So for anyone that's already seen some of my work, which I imagine is pretty much everyone here, you'll understand that I talk a lot about connection, a lot about relationship. So let's go to the next one. So here I'm establishing a verbal communication. So here I've used words, I've spoken. In the one on the left, I've screamed, and you can see there's a mouth open with a kind of scream coming out. I've said shalom, can you see me? I always find that one very interesting because it's like there's three eyes coming out. I said hi, and so hi is a little bit of one for me where I just did some crystallography and I got a little high in the ice, so it's always water's little way of saying hello to me. And then you probably have seen some of these, but I can promise you there's a lot of this talk that you've never seen before. So where I asked, do you know my name? And it designed my initials in exactly the same way that I write my initials. So then what I'm going to show you next in just a second is that over the course of a couple of years, occasionally I'll be in a particularly foul mood, which doesn't happen often. The children have driven me crazy, I've been stuck in traffic, something's happened, and in those genuine frustrated moods, I have gone ahead and screamed, said shalom, can you see me, hi, and do you know my name, to see if water will respond to me the same way when I'm not in the right space. So if we go to the next one, you'll see that they're very different. Screaming is just very compacted. Shalom, you can still see a heart in there, so there's a power to that, even in the frustration. And can you see me in the middle? There's like a little sort of an eye thing. But hi didn't happen, and also there's a kind of V in do you know my name? So there's still something, but it's not nearly as clear as the one prior. So I really want you to see that sometimes water does not do what I invite it to do if I'm frustrated or annoyed, which doesn't happen that often, but occasionally it does. Okay, let's move on. So here's some more verbal communication where I've just been in my normal, just open space, where I've asked, do you know my Indian names? So I have two given Indian names, Veda and Karan, and so you can see the VK. My mum always used to say, snug as a bug in a rug, so that's what that little guy is. Can you show me what life looks like on another planet? Can you design for me? And I love you. Next. So these are some songs that I've played to water. So whenever I play a song, I always leave the room, come back and immediately do the crystallography so that whatever I feel about that song isn't being projected. So Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton, House of the Rising Sun. Well, I had to do Tupac because my son loves Tupac, so all eyes on me. Sailing and the Padme hum is a Buddhist chant, which is quite beautiful. So what we're seeing, though, is that water's picking up on words in songs. And I think that's very interesting. And it's designing images that are quite complex. So let's go along again. So many of you would have seen this, but it's just establishing some consistency. So when I did Stairway to Heaven, I would keep seeing this kind of stairway. And this is relative to something that my son said, which we're going to share later in the talk. But just kind of put that in your mind, that Stairway to Heaven has something to do with a stairway, and this will be a bit of a repeated theme throughout the talk. All right, let's go ahead. Now, this is using frequencies. So this is the image that was designed in the ice when I used the 528 hertz frequency. And what you're hearing is that frequency. So this is what we would call the creation glyph, and there's a kind of little heart underneath it. Let's go on to the next frequency. That pattern that you see is what we call the free energy glyph. I think it's really nice that you actually get to see them as they've come out of the freezer. Let's go to the next one. And we consistently see a kind of spiraled pattern with the sound of Om. And let's go to the next one. This is dolphins communicating with a diver. So I want to bring your attention into the middle. Now I'm going to get my clicker. I knew making him do all the work up here. I actually should be doing it myself. But hopefully this will work. See this little sort of bit, well, that little outline there, you probably saw it before. That is kind of interesting because hopefully I can move along. When we look at it over here, you can see that actually that sound's projected, and we can see that there is a diver inside. And this correlates exactly with another study that was done by John Stewart Reed recently.
Recent research in the field of dolphin communication by the company Simoscope is beginning to show promise. A dolphin's echolocation beam was directed at a submerged man. The echo was captured by a high-specification recording device with cymatic holographic imaging and sent to an off-site laboratory for analysis. After the sound sample was imprinted onto a water membrane, researchers were immediately able to recognize the full silhouette of a human. Researchers now hypothesize that dolphins may employ a sonopictorial form of language, a language of pictures that they share with each other. If that proves to be true, an exciting future lies ahead for interspecies communications.
She's speaking like 1,000,000 miles an hour, but the essence of that is that you saw the visual. So he uses cymatic waves, and so what we're seeing is that sound actually can create form. And so that's what we're seeing within the crystallography, is that sound creates form relative to where the sound came from. I think that's really interesting. So this is a native New Zealand bird. And it created like a sketch, which is really interesting. And this is kind of the tui. So I thought that was really cute. This is a gong. And there's a funny story behind this, was because I was, in my arrogance, thinking that water would just design something that looked like the sound of Om, because the gong kind of sounded a bit like the Om to me. But water doesn't always do what you think it's going to do. More often than not, it won't. And so it designed the gong with the mallet on top instead. So these are from movies, where I've put the petri dish of water in front of a movie, and it has designed various patterns. So we'll go here. This little guy here looks like a TIE fighter that's crashed, according to my son from Star Wars, and Iron Man looks like the helmet that he wears, and the rest are kind of self-explanatory. And while we're on movies, I don't know if we can make it big again, thank you. There's this part in a certain movie where Batman says to Aquaman, and he's asking how we spoke to fish. And Batman, it's actually meant to be Aquaman who answered, so I need to readjust that. It was like 3 a.m. when I put it together. That he doesn't talk to the fish, he talks to the water. So I thought that was kind of cool. So this is kind of cool and sad. So there was a video that was sent to me, and this was years ago, where there was a video of this pig that was in a truck that was being taken to the abattoir, and the pig managed to escape and jump out. And the water was, I always have a petri dish of water near me, and it was sitting beside the video on my computer. And so the pig was fine, and someone actually came and saved it. But I don't know if you can see, I've outlined the pig at the bottom. So the first pig was very clear, but there was in the actual video, you didn't see a second pig. But why this is important is that there was probably a second pig that was trying to escape with the first one. And water is showing me here, and many more times, which we'll see, that it is seeing things that we don't see. So I think this is important. Let's go. I'll do it. Okay, so this is visual communication. I'm just going through all the different ways that water can communicate. I promise we are going to get into ancient civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, and all of that, but I am just wanting to establish this first. So in visual communication, where I've used pictures as my inspiration, and you can see the inspiration at the bottom, and above it is the response from water. I want to bring your attention to the starfish. Water designs hexagons, that's its natural form, so you'll usually see 6-sided stars. To see a 5-sided star is extremely unusual. So this is really great evidence that water was picking up on the image, because it would not normally ever do that. Let's go to the next one. I like to use imagery, and I'm sure you've seen some of these already, so we're going to whiz through some of it. Like I said, it's the same. So you'll probably be familiar with my friend Wendy by now. We call her the face of water. What's fascinating is that I put my dish of water on top of her photo for 30 seconds, froze using my technique, and obviously we see her face. But what's interesting is that I also then put my dish of water on top of the ice image of her face to see what would happen. And you can see that it designed the negative of her face. Now the next video image that I'm going to show you is simply just a photo that I took of reflections in the water. So it's kind of what we might term as very random. But when I showed it to the water in the dish, you can see that it designed something extremely similar. So I think it's nice to see that when we start to see consistency. So this is the Attif crown, and a friend of mine who produced the series called Magical Egypt asked me to do this. So you can see that it's really picked up on the crown there. Now, physical communication, this is kind of satisfying because you can actually see what I put in the water, and you can see the imprint that arised. So you can see the one where I put the butter knife on top of the petri dish. I work in my kitchen all the time, so I'm just using things that are handy. Sometimes things seem random, but they're really not. I have an everything drawer. Sometimes I go into it and I just pick things out and I think, oh, well, that'll do. But you might notice that on the outside, there are 2 coasters, and there are 2 coasters that are present in the ice imagery. What's interesting about that is they were not part of my intention, not part of my even awareness. So water again is showing that it's picking up on things around it as well. Here are some more. I think this is a really important thing, is show that water reads potentials. So when I've put a sunflower seed into water, removed it, you'll see that it's actually designed the outcome. It's read the potential of the seed and designed the sunflower, and that's actually where the seed came from. I did the same thing with a flax seed. This is a native New Zealand flax. It's actually from my garden, and that's the little seed, and it's designed, again, the pods and the flowers from where the seed originated. So it's reading the potential within the seed, and I think this is extremely interesting and important. When I've just put an empty pistachio shell, it designed the shell only. This is not where I was. A lot of the time I'm not intending on inspiring water. I just say, well, I'll just put it in the freezer and see what water wants to show me. But I had actually taken a photo of the dish, and I didn't really notice that my glasses were there, and I'm always losing my glasses, so it's rare that two are in the same place. And so it designed glasses.
What we're seeing here is seawater with a quartz crystal pyramid inside. What my intention was is that I was putting the pyramid into the seawater for 30 seconds, removing it, and I was going to put it into the freezer to see if it reflected anything to do with the pyramid. So I put the pyramid in, removed it, but completely forgot to put it into the freezer because I was getting ready to go overseas. So it was sitting on my bench top for a couple of weeks whilst I was in America. And when I came back, I discovered that the seawater had evaporated and what was left was salt crystals. So let's take a closer look at the salt crystals. What we see, and I'll point them out in a second here, is that the salt crystals have taken on the form and shape of the quartz crystal. They look like pyramids. The nature of salt crystals is actually cubic. So what we're actually seeing here is the imagery of the exact same water that had no influence. I tend to collect jam jars of seawater and use some of it for different work I do. So I was able to use the exact same water, put it into a dish, let it evaporate with no influence and see the cubic forms. So to be seeing these pyramid shapes is really remarkable.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So here my daughter's having fun with water. I always recommend have fun with water. It's actually the more serious you get, the less imagery you get. So it really is just about having fun and being open. Emotional communication. So often when I'm working with water, water is reading my emotions. It's more interested in what we're feeling than what we're thinking. So often I'll be showing something to water, it will completely ignore me and show a reflection of how I'm feeling. So that happens a lot when I'm sad. If I'm doing something, it will ignore me completely and it will reflect me and make sad faces. Loving energy tends to form hearts and hexagons. Frustrated and angry tends to thicken and be very disordered. Stressed is it's kind of lined with all these spikes coming out, and grateful forms gorgeous hexagons. Happy, you often see little happy faces or hexagons again. We're going to talk a lot about hexagons. Deceitful is an interesting one because it looks like a person with a spear in the back of it. Empathetic is beautiful. Fearful looks like somebody's stuck with kind of like strings attached. And self-loathing is probably one of the worst. The silent treatment, some of you may have seen this, I posted it recently, but it's very hard for me to ignore water, especially intentionally. So the point is this was intentional ignoring. And so the water was ignored for a week, and you can see that it was very, very disordered afterwards. I gave it loads of love, don't worry, and it came back to life. Written communication. So here I've written words in English, in Japanese, and in Latin. So I think the conception one is quite remarkable. Intimacy looks like two people touching noses. In my culture, in the Maori culture, when we greet each other, we actually meet each other nose to nose, forehead to forehead, and breathe in each other. The Japanese says yuki, which means snow. Transformation looks a bit like a butterfly, and pugio is Latin for dagger. Every single one has a story behind it, but we'll be here for 5 hours just talking about that, so I'll kind of whiz through. IVF is an interesting one because it's really just letters put together. It doesn't create a word, but it designed the needle coming into eggs. At least that's what it looks like to me. Marriage is a ring. That particular kind of tree, it designed that so beautifully. Creation, well, we're going to talk a lot about that. And shaman created a kind of interesting shaman mask. Here is where water's designed words and letters. So I played the song Fly Me to the Moon, and it wrote fly. Om, and you can see the om there. Again, I asked water if it knew my name, and it designed my initials again. And then I invited it to share a number of significance. And so I'm not sure if it's 19 or 197 or 191 with a little skull or something. It's a little hard to know, but there's definitely a 1 and a 9. This is really interesting. So I spoke the word Yeshua into the water prior to freezing, and it looks like a cup or a vessel. But then when you zoom in, you'll notice that there is some unusual writing. And I shared it on social media, and I had a number of people that speak Hebrew and said, actually, it looks just like Hebrew for Yeshua. Communication through projected thought. So my daughter did the thought of a unicorn. She loves unicorns. The thought of a skull, the thought of a phoenix. That, again, is my daughter Shanti's. I did thought of the man in the moon, and my son Rama, the charmer, thought of an arrow. So no one's seen the last 4 here. So this is where I've had a picture in my mind's eye and projected it into the water prior to freezing. So the only one that's different is where I wrote love. Actually, writing something in your mind's eye takes way longer than you'd imagine. So I wrote love slowly in capital letters in my mind's eye, then opened my eyes, looked at the water and froze it, and you can see that it's designed the word love in there. For the others, I was working with just mostly shapes. So I would hold the image in my eye, in my mind's eye, and then just think it into the water. And it's surprising because the pyramid one actually created a 3-dimensional pyramid that's sticking up. So this is an interesting story which leads into someone I really am passionate about by the name of Gennady Krokalev, who did some incredible stuff. So over a century ago, a French photographer called Pierre, hopefully I don't botch his name, Boucher, he accidentally took photos of mind-made images. So he sounds like a character. He went to this rambunctious party, and I don't know what he did, but he was feeling terrible in the morning, and he'd also been suffering from a lot of reoccurring visions and nightmares. And so he had a really bad nightmare, and he was going to the lab to develop photographs. So he used to take photographs of people. And this was back in the day when it was black and white photos, so he was really hungover. And he had this ongoing noise in his head, and he got to his lab, and so he started developing the photo. But whilst he was developing the photo of someone that he had photographed, he had this kind of vision of this creature in his mind's eye that he had been seeing in these nightmares. And when he developed the photo and it kind of came out, there was actually an image of what he was seeing in his mind, not of the person he'd photographed. So then this magazine was issued called See the Other Way Around, which actually started talking about this idea that hallucinations or visions can be photographed. And so it inspired Gennady Krokalev, who was a scientist and a psychiatrist, to see whether or not it's possible to photograph the retina of his patient's eyes as they were having a hallucination. So what he would do, and I've watched videos of him doing this because I have a Russian friend that helped me actually find more out about him. It's very hard to find much of his work at all. A lot of it was classified. But essentially what he did was that he would carefully and nicely talk to his patients. He set up something called a zenith camera, which is a black and white camera, and he put these kind of like a scuba diving mask over the eyes of his patients and took out the lenses, and he attached that to the lens of the camera. And then when they were comfortable, there was another person recording what they were saying, and he said, so when you start to have a vision, tell us what you're seeing. He was photographing the retina of the eye. And so they would, when they said, yes, I'm seeing this and this, he would photograph it. And he did this with over 200 patients over 20 years, and around about 117 of them confirmed that the photos that he took were in fact what they were seeing. And this was repeated by more Russian scientists in the last 15 years, but rather than use psychiatric patients, they used someone who could remote view. And so they got her to sit down, they used the same whole setup, you're going to see it in a minute, and the scientist stood behind a wall and held up numbers and shapes. And as she tuned in, she'd say yes, they clicked the camera, and they were able to take photos of what she was seeing. Now, sadly, Gennady had rung his brother 3 hours before he died. He rang him and he said, I've just discovered something that will change the world. 3 hours later, he was found hanging. So, and then his stuff was totally classified. So finding any of his imagery is actually really, really hard, but I've found a few photos. So this is all about him. So here's what he's doing up the top, and down below are some of the images. So we have to remember that this is photos of people's eyes. This isn't like taking photos on our camera or anything like that. So we're seeing this black and white imagery. So the one on the left says horns or antlers. The one in the middle is quite obviously a face, and the one on the right says snake in Russian. So this is what the scientists that were using the remote viewer, this is a couple of the images that she saw as she tuned into shapes and numbers. So what they're suggesting is that thought is material in some level. There were two hypotheses. One was that there is a secondary realm of consciousness, and another is that the brain sends information to the retina of the eye that translates that into picture imagery and projects it out like a hologram, and that's what can be captured on camera. And when you think about how orbs can be captured on camera, that's another interesting topic altogether. So this is Dr. Marcel Vogel, so we are going to talk about him a little bit as we get into the second half. We talk about crystals a little bit. So Marcel Vogel worked for IBM for years, but he also figured out how to cut crystals a certain way to really use them as tools for energy. And he also worked a lot with water. So that image that you see there was where he was basically waiting for the liquid crystal to grow, and as he was projecting the thought of the Madonna, it actually redesigned itself into the form in front of him. This is the work of a friend of mine called Sean Pikasik. So he does cymatics, which is sound waves through water. uses light to be able to see what they're designing. So as far as I know, he's the first person to do ice cymatics, where he puts a sound wave into water and it freezes, so you can actually see the shapes, which I think is really cool. And then cymatics on the right, he was actually saying that when he's thinking about something specific, often he will see certain shapes, whether they're butterflies or whether they're angels, and he sees consistency in the shapes that form when he's thinking about something. This is another one of his work, which is kind of interesting, where you can see a face in the middle. Mold. Why do we want to look at mold? Well, this is interesting because it's molding to consciousness. So I used to go into schools, and one day I went into my daughter's class, and often I have to take all the samples back home because we can't use the staff freezer because it's too small or it's packed or something. So I get all the children to project their thought into the water. I write their name and I write what they're thinking about, and then I take all the samples home. So I took them all home, and normally I do the crystallography, take them back to the school and just kind of offer the pictures. So what's interesting is that my daughter fell sick later that night, and then she was off school for a few days. And so it took me a week until I got around to even looking at the crystallography. And what I found was that everyone else's samples were all fine. There were 3 that had mold growing on the surface. And one of them was my daughter's, which is the one that has the little face, the little kind of smiley face thing. And so I rang the teacher and I said, look, this is kind of weird, but there's mold on 3 of them. And she said, oh, well, which ones? And I told her, and she says, all those 3 children, including your daughter, have been off school sick. I'm like, really? And they all had got a cold or something. And so when we brought them over, my daughter had been thinking of a smiley face, this other boy had been thinking of a dragon, and the other child had been thinking of a hippo. I just can't find the photo. But the mold had literally formed into what they were thinking. This is some more work by Marcel Vogel, where he put a lie detector test, if you will, onto, like a polygraph, onto a plant. And what he discovered is that they thought of hurting the plant affected the plant more than the actual physical doing of the hurting of the plant. So you see that big kind of line going up, that's when he thought of burning the leaf. And so when he actually did it, it was less traumatic than it was the very thought of hurting it. So the plant was picking up on the thought and having an electrical response to it. So I think we've established that water has, certainly in my world and the world of many people that have been doing this work, responds in an intelligent, emotional, artistic way to various forms of connected communication. But what other ways can it communicate, and how is it working? So contemporary science says that water can't store memory because it's updating its information every trillionth of a second. It's breaking its bonds, forming again. It's just in constant chaos. So how could it be interested in what we're thinking at all? That's what traditional science would say. But if you talk to someone in quantum physics, they will tell you there's a very big difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. When you're excited about something, there's usually something you're excited about. So how does water get excited about what we're thinking? How does that connection form? So you might wonder why there's bees, and some people may have heard this story and some may not. I think it's important to know anyway. I was talking to someone who said she could communicate to bees, and she would watch their hive for long periods of time. And one day a bee came out and communicated to her and said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive," however it said this. And I just imagine in my mind. But please don't look at it for so long, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker. So where we put our conscious expression is where we put our light. Water is a container of light. It holds photons. So where we are basically putting our intention is also where we are directing our light. And water is so sensitive that it's able to pick up on that. And just like Geneti's work, where basically there is this idea of a thought creating a picture, well, here we're seeing it too. I actually think it's light that paves the way for the design of the ice. Because you'll see in this picture here, these little spears will have a kind of halo of light around them. When I opened my fridge earlier, at just the perfect time, as the water's starting to freeze, you can physically see the light coming out of the ice. And that's what I've captured here and multiple other photographs. So water is a container of light, and light is information. So I think this is one of the most important things that water has taught me. And it's tap water that taught me it. A lot of spiritual and health-conscious communities say that tap water is terrible, you don't want to drink that, we're total water snobs, we're not putting that in our body, oh my God, no, poor tap water gets the worst rap. No, I'm not talking about drinking it, but what did it teach me? Well, tap water has very disordered patterns, typically. I'm talking about municipal tap water that you can see there on the left. But when I let that melt, and then hold it to my heart for 1 minute, and then refreeze the exact same water, you can see it started restructure and reform into what looks much more like spring water. But it didn't change chemically. So what does it mean? Well, what it really means is that water is more akin to an emotion. We are seeing an emotional response. So I kind of think of tap water like a sick person. When you care for someone who's sick, they feel very grateful. So water is literally feeling better. So in the Maori culture, the word mauri means life force energy. It's an energy that binds and animates all things in the physical world, but without mauri or life force energy, mana can't enter it, and mana is a spiritual presence. So if tap water has low life force energy, it's not able to fully embody its spiritual presence, and this goes for people. So imagine if collectively we could energetically uplift the vast bodies of water that have been processed and polluted, and by doing so give water at least its dignity and spiritual power back. So here you can see where I had invited people from all around the world to send love to my tap water. So you can see before and after. The image on the right there is some of the most beautiful, clear crystallography I've seen. Even spring water, I would say that if I saw that, that was beautiful spring water, but it wasn't. It transformed from disordered tap water to water that looked like that from people sending love to it from all around the world. So again, it didn't change chemically, but it definitely changed structurally. So we have signature patterns, so you can identify the different patterns of different water. They all come from the hexagon. So hexagons are so important in our world for so many different reasons, which I'll get into later, but up the top and down the bottom we're seeing two different ways that the hexagon degrades. So you see it's tightly packed in the middle, that star on the left. That star starts to open and open and open until eventually it becomes a dot. And then the other way it degrades is that a fern will come off and it will eventually go from grass to a line. So we end up with lines and dots, and that's what tap water is. Now, up the top are variations of spring water patterns from between 72 hours and a week, kept in a glass container, and underneath is the same kept in a plastic container. And this is what we want to see. bigger is better when it comes to hexagons. This is water in the most pristine life force energy that it has, where we see that the hexagons are huge. Now, this is exciting for me because this is where I'm getting, some really wonderful information from water that could potentially really change the way we understand what water is trying to say. I've called them hydroglyphs. So that little sentence there is really important. Hydroglyphs are not a language of words, but are symbolic reminders of divine thoughts. So a hydroglyph are repeatable symbols in ice that hold the original power or energy of words at their very most fundamental level. So one glyph or symbol can represent multiple words and functions. So I derived these meanings by using written words as my way of communicating prior to freezing. So water doesn't read words. So it recognizes the energy of a word and crystallizes into a specific symbol. So even when I've written words in different languages, I've seen the same symbol appear. Some languages are more complex, like Hebrew. So often we'll see the symbol, but we'll see extra hydroglyphs around it. So it gives it actually more meaning. So to say I have discovered one hydroglyph, I need to have seen the same symbol appear at least 50 times. So when I do it, it's not like it's 1 in every 10 or 1 in every 20, it's every time, unless for some reason I'm in a bad mood and that doesn't work. Okay, let's look at some. These are 64 examples of the hydroglyph that we know means change and winter. And what I've done is created, just put things that I think it looks like. I think we can learn a lot from nature and the designs that nature organically creates to understand meaning. This is what the change glyph looks like, how I take it out of the freezer, and you can see that the change glyph is right there. It's very easy to see. This is the information glyph, and it's interesting how much it looks like a cross between some different ancient texts. We know it means much more than that, but we're still learning. And it's through people like you and all these people around the world that are learning how to do this that actually help me find hydroglyphs, because I can't do it all myself. This is just to show it has some very big similarities to some ancient texts. This is the lotus hydroglyph. And I've just shared things that I think it kind of looks like, and this is what it looks like in the dish. You can see it, hopefully I can point it, well, you can see it there. It has always got a nest that it nests inside. Here is the marriage or ring glyph. We know it means both those words. A lot of people sometimes think maybe it's a bubble, but actually you can see quite clearly here that it's not a bubble. It is actually a ring. It looks like a ring. This is the electrical charge glyph, and it also means salt. So we see this symbol sometimes in seawater, sometimes in frozen urine, and sometimes in regular water. Not that any water is regular, but you know what I mean. So it looks like a bit of a subwoofer to me. So this is what they look like. Water really overdid it here. You usually only see like 1 or 2, but it just went for it. So as we kind of go through this video, you see more of the indentation as I move to the other side over here. See how it's more indented there? So that's what they look like. The message glyph, we know a lot about this because we've seen it by all the people that work around the world with me. So it looks like a kind of triangle with frill, and at the end of some of them, but not all of them, they have a heart at the end. So we know that that means it's a loving message. And when it's not there, we still know it's a message, but we don't know what kind yet. The stars mean light, guidance, imagine, and memory. So if you think about how many times I've done that, That's 200 times I've done that to get all of those. Living and death, so the hexagon, I call it what it looks like to me, the star fern hexagon. It means living and it means death. Someone reached out to me and said they'd only be given a few months to live. Can I please ask what death looked like? And so I kept seeing the living glyph. And eventually I realized, of course, that water doesn't die. We use the word dead water, we use the word polluted water, but water always evaporates and it reincarnates all the time. So to water, death is simply another word for life. It's a transition. And this is what the living or glyph looks like. There's quite a lot of things actually in this dish. I can also see the purity symbol, but you can see up the top there that that's what quite a large hexagon looks like. This is the money and abundance glyph. So someone once said to me when I posted this, well, if water is so intelligent and ancient, why would it ever want to talk about money? Money is the root of all evil. Which is interesting because, again, this is not a physical word. This is the energy of a word, and the idea of money is an exchange. We've been flicking coins into wishing wells since goodness knows how long. And so water and coins have actually had an intimate relationship for quite a long time. So abundance could have nothing to do with money. So this symbol is a very ancient symbol. It's a circle. But it's very three-dimensional. And if this is a language, we can't just pick and choose what we like. People have been trading, exchanging for such a long time. And it's also an invitation to see what is your relationship with the energy of money and what is your relationship with the energy of abundance and what's the essence of it.
I wanted to show you a couple of demonstrations as to how I identify hydroglyphs. So you see I wrote the word money there. The petri dish of water had been on top of that word for 30 seconds. I've removed it. Here it's at the right stage of freezing where there is liquid on top and ice underneath. I wipe the frost away, tip the liquid water away, and let's have a look at the hydroglyph for money here. You can see those little coins have appeared in the ice. Now let's try that again. I've put the petri dish of water on the word money again, put it in the freezer, frozen it to the right timing. You can see there's liquid and ice. Again, I'm going to wipe away that frost and hold it up, tip the liquid away and look for the coin. Is there a coin in here? And there it is. Now let's zoom in on that and have a bit of a closer look. And you can see that it's right there.
Okay, you might think that this is the same picture. My husband was looking and investigating about plant medicines. So this was when he used the word ayahuasca as the inspiration prior to freezing. One was taken one day and the other one was 3 days later. They're virtually identical. So these are my hydroglyphs. This is an entire language. So I'm going to go from the top right all the way to the end. Up the top, what you'll see is lots of little circles. That means to multiply or multiple. The circle beside it means completion. The ring you've seen means marriage and ring. That empty hexagon means individual, which can reduce to I. Then we have the stress glyph, which comes out of a platform. Then we have interwoven, sacred, change in winter, money abundance, conception, wholeness, breathe or lungs, addiction, chemical, to climb up or staircase, information, magic, light, guidance, electrical charge, free energy, earth, sometimes that can also mean mother, air, message, knowledge, purity, enlightenment, living, death, gratitude, friends, bond, to rise up, creation, water, organism, visionary, before Easter, after Easter, extraterrestrial, heart, which means love, sun, crop circle, seed, and cleanse. We have a couple more too, but that is what we have so far as some of the meanings that we know. So if you sit with this picture, I painted this for you guys, because I wanted to make it kind of look like a cave painting, and I just put some hydroglyphs on it. So if you sit with these pictographs and feel into them, like a message kind of comes to you, and I'm sure you're very intuitive and you can kind of get a feeling for it. So I'll let you kind of think about that for a second. The next thing you're going to see is that when you add words to it, it changes things and you can start questioning what you're feeling. So if you were to try to put this into some kind of context and some kind of meaning, it could say, amongst other things, a whole living message of complete love for the changing earth from two extraterrestrial sources, and crop circles are created by the multiplication and interweave of electrical charge, water, salt, light, and free energy. It's hard to believe it could say all that. But hydroglyphs, they're not words. They are the visible, touchable, edible, intuitive energy of the foundation of where words came from. A more accurate way to read my previous interpretation would be to say that the energy of living is in relationship with the energy of whole, and the energy of message is in relationship with the energy of complete. But what's wrong with this picture? My painted 2D impression lacks the qualities and intricacies of the actual hydroglyphs, and this is the hydroglyphs that I painted. But it's also a product of the human desire to copy, understand, and simplify concepts and information to eventually become words. But if I didn't already know the word whole, I wouldn't have any context for this particular hydroglyph. We call it the tree of life, and it means whole or wholeness. So water is literally reverse engineering the static words and bringing them back to their living principles, and in turn offering a plethora of connected meanings. For example, this glyph looks like a tree. So a tree could be a connected meaning of the energy of the word whole. And this method offers us a remarkable opportunity to commune with a non-human, non-bodied intelligence that it's not limited to any realm in time or space. So even when we compared it to Sumerian texts and to Egyptian texts, it kind of looks like this with the information glyph, we have to remember it was created by a non-bodied substance. This is the energy of the word air, and I think it's interesting because when I see this, it kind of reminds me of patterns of that are on the water when the wind blows. It also looks a lot like feathers. So feeling into hydroglyphs is actually the way we're designed to understand them. So I've been using the written words as my kind of Rosetta Stone to help me translate the living language of water, or at least one of them. I think water communicates in all kinds of ways. Our modern world uses words to describe, teach, communicate. So by writing them down, I'm intentionally imprinting meaning into paper. But those meanings are only meaningful to people that read or know that language. So what's interesting about hydroglyphs is that when they're presented to someone for the first time as visual symbols, who actually don't have any idea or have any background about their meaning, they get to feel into them and intuitively kind of grasp concepts. So I asked a friend, I showed her the free energy glyph, and I said, what did it feel like? And she said it felt like organized chaos. Whereas a child said it looks like a growing shape that made him feel tickly. So hydroglyphs take the energetic information from a word and give it a picture form that can be understood in multiple ways universally. So words are expanded to an energy or essence, and they come back to life and talk to each other. So modern day hieroglyphs are emojis. the young people of today, sound ancient, can actually have whole entire conversations using emojis. And we understand them well. If you don't do a little kissy face, someone often knows there's something wrong. So we do actually understand symbols very well. So what's the most significant thing hydroglyphs have been used for? Well, they're the voice for the voiceless, and they're a natural medicine. So, a while ago, a mother reached out to me, and she has a very disabled child. Her child can't communicate, can't speak, and can't use her hands well. So she can't write. And her mother had heard about me somehow, and she said, you know, I always wonder if my daughter knows how much I love her. And so she said, if I send a recording of the sounds she makes after I ask her if she knows, can you please see what water will do? And so I did. And although she wanted to keep the actual crystallography private, she's permission to share the symbols that were actually in the dish. And I can read them for you. So what we have is the empty hexagon, which means individual, which reduces to I. Then we have love. Then we have multiple, or many, or so much. Then we have the earth, which we also means mother. I love you so much, Mum. And I shared it with them on FaceTime. And when I was reading it, and the mother was there and crying, and I really struggled to speak about this, the little girl started trying to clap her hands. So, hydroglyphs have so much importance. So they're also a natural medicine. So we have been using words, writing them down, and they come from the intuition within you, the well of knowledge inside of you. So by writing a word, putting your dish of water on top of it, using my method, you'll see some beautiful crystallography. My children taught me this. So I was holding up a dish, and my daughter Shanti, Mummy, can I have that? And I said, sure. I gave her the dish. And I thought she was just going to look at it, but she started eating the ice. And I said, oh, what are you doing? And she said, it's good for me, Mummy. I was like, oh, really? And so I was like, okay. And then a few weeks later, her brother wanted to do the same thing, totally separate to her. So I pick up patterns. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And then as I've been working with other parents, they've told me that their children also eat the crystallography. So my husband, who's very kind of explorative, I guess, he was working with words for plant medicines. And not only was he writing the word, taking the photos and recording it all, he was eating the ice. So he had a whole week of writing the word ayahuasca to see what would happen. And he was also eating the ice. And a week later, he came to me and he said, I actually think I need to take this a little seriously. He was starting to have very, very vivid dreams. He was starting to have very mild expressions of an ayahuasca journey. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. And so I have all these beginners workshops. I started sharing it. And so it seems that a lot of people suffer from insomnia. And so they started writing the word rest, or whatever the word is. Sometimes that word may have seemingly nothing to do with what you're wanting, but it would be the right word. Your body knows what the word is, because words have power. And so people started writing the word and eating the ice afterwards, no matter what the ice looked like. And it usually took them about a week to 10 days, but I had all these emails starting to come in saying, oh my God, I'm actually sleeping. Someone even used it to help with constipation. And I did an interview with a lady called Rachel Tudor who had a vaccine injury and at one point couldn't even walk. And she ate the ice every single day for 9 months. She had a list of words that she's kept about this big. And she noticed her body changing, improving, and now she's had a complete bill of health. So there is no clinical trials, nothing like that. This is really, really early stages, but the children taught us this, and we got to listen to what they've got to say because they know. It's so easy to do, and it's also fun. It tastes good because the water is frozen in the 4th phase of water. We don't freeze the water solid. It's in the stage between liquid and ice. So the water is ordered, it's structured, and it is more of a plasma at that stage. So it's good for you. Also, it pushes out salates, so it's the purest type of water. It doesn't hold all of the heavy metals or a lot of the minerals or any of those kinds of things. Actually, it's very clear, which is why you see such clear crystallography at the stage of freezing I freeze it at. So, as at pareidolia, that's just basically seeing images and saying, oh, that kind of looks like a face, and oh, that kind of... So it's a good question, and it's a fair enough question to ask. So what it means is the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern. The scientific explanation for some people is pareidolia, or the human ability to see shapes or make pictures out of randomness. I don't know that what we've said. I don't think like hundreds of photos of one particular thing is random, and I think that's important. Like I know we want to talk about ancient civilizations and stuff, and I promise I've got a whole thing on it. But it is important we understand there is a science behind this, and it's exciting, and it's new, and it's cutting edge, and anyone can do it. It's not just me. Like every single one of you is a body of water that has the ability to communicate with all these other bodies of water inside a physical body and outside of a physical body. So this is other people's work doing it. You might see that it looks like a bird. Well, this is my friend John. John lives in Utah. John does as much crystallography nearly as I do, and he's been doing it for the last 2 years. But what's different, and I'm slightly jealous about him, is that he lives somewhere where it's cold enough to use nature's freezer. He freezes outside, and he can film it freezing. So this is actually on a table. So he got really creative, and he threw water over a table and watched the whole thing freeze. And there were lots and lots of birds in the morning flying around. And you can see that water has designed a bird in the ice outside, not in a freezer. So this is just a bunch of other people's work with the influence or the inspiration to the right and the picture on the left. Now, you might wonder why anyone would be interested in nail clippers. That's John again, because he just happened to have nail clippers beside the petri dish, and it often designs what's near it. A lot of this is from children. Okay, now I won't go back here. See down the bottom, somebody did the coin down there, but it actually looks, the image is over frozen, but you can see the image of a head, but it's the back of the head, and it looks like he's been shot in the back of the head. See the Afghan dog down the bottom? So this lady was one of the first people to ever learn my technique. And she was using, I don't know, words or pictures of tulips. But all week she'd been worried about her dog, because one of her dogs had already passed, and her Afghan dog had been sick all week. And so she put her dish of water on tulips, and it designed her dog. And she rang and she said to me, "Why does it design my dog?" And I said, because water's not, it doesn't do small talk. It's reading what you're feeling, not what you're projecting and thinking. It's got more depth than that. The chicken, this is somebody's chicken, had chickens, and the chicken was playing with the water, and so they clawing at the water, and so it designed the chicken claw. This is just more people's work. So, I mean, I have thousands of other people's work now. I think the consistency is really overwhelming. I have almost nearly 45,000 photos. I am absolutely prolific. I do this nearly every single day. And so I think that says something. So what have others discovered that supports my work with watering of consciousness? It's nice to see. This is a really interesting study. So these people took a section of the living leaf, they dissected some of it, and they placed the dissected part into a high-frequency electromagnetic field. But rather than seeing the dissected part, it just showed the entire leaf less the dissected part. And they called it phantom transference. So this ties in with the idea that we have the phantom arm. If your arm is amputated, a lot of people will feel like their arm is still there. That's because there literally is a subtle field, a memory of the whole. This is a cute test that involves little chickens, and this man, Rene Pollack, he created this little green robot, and it can drive itself around on wheels and had a pen underneath to trace its path on paper, and a random number generator for the steering. So every few seconds it would change direction. So the chickens hatched, and it was moving around, so they bonded with the little green robot, and they loved it. And so up the top you can see that there are some random patterns that the little green robot made, and that's what it was sort of originally doing. But when they put the chickens into the corner, the little robot stayed in the corner where the chickens loved it. And then when they introduced rabbits, the rabbits were scared of it, so it went back to doing its random number thing. But when they put a little candle on top of the green robot at night, the rabbits liked the light. So again, the robot came and it just stayed in that little corner. So how can love affect little robots? It seems that they can. This experiment was done by the Aerospace Institute in Germany. So it was all from the same body of water. The lines across all basically indicate each different person. So each drop of water took on the signature of the individual people, even though it was from the same body of water. This is my friend Laurent Costa's work. This was one of my inspirations. So often he would smile at the water prior to freezing it. This is microscopic. He would flash freeze it in a similar way to a motor, but he was seeing faces. He was seeing little cats or rabbits, and he was seeing hearts. And so often he would see things that he'd been thinking about over the week, or something that had happened in his day. He was not intentionally trying to influence the water, he was trying to actually be the observer. He didn't want to experiment on water because he thought of water as his spiritual teacher. And so I think that's why he gets such beautiful imagery. But this is one of his most interesting ones. So he was telling me that he had a water bottle on top of a book all about Leonardo da Vinci. And the image he got is very reminiscent of one of his paintings that was in the book. Okay, observation in nature that reflect communication through patterning, form and water. Often shells have imagery, and the imagery is very similar to the information glyph and the change glyph. This one has hearts. My husband found it. And it organically has hearts already imprinted on it.
Look at these weird ice formations. The heck? This is wild. What is this?
I think I found the ice aliens. Whoa! What is this? What in the heck? Oh my gosh, look at this one! This is wild. It's like full on trying to tell us something. alien ice. Holy moly. Weird spring and warming formations here. Like, what in the heck? Whoa.
So as you can see, there's a lot going on there. And I actually had a conversation with this lady
Insane.
who does wild skating in remote places. And I think it's going to show it in a minute. Oh, sure.
Cool. Really cool. It's wonderful. Right there. There's a hanger.
Anyway, I don't know how to pause it. But when I spoke to her, she did whiz past it, but there's like an alien face in the ice as well. So there were hydroglyphs in there. There was a circumpunct, which is the circle with the dot inside. There was a thing that looked like a rib cage. There was a lot going on in there, and I had a lot of conversations with her. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So this is a video of something that someone's deck. If we can just push the go button again, please. Thank you. It was just everywhere. It's so pretty. I would have loved to have had this happen. It's just patterns everywhere, and they reflect all of the different flowers and scenery around where they live. This is interesting because the top left picture is actually a swimming pool, and the other areas are different lakes that have frozen over, but they've formed into the same pattern. And this lady that sent it to me, she lives in the Hudson Valley. And these formations are very interesting because different waters often won't freeze into the same design, especially swimming pools because of the chlorine. So to see the same design constantly and consistently and very largely designed is very interesting to me. And the Hudson Valley is a very interesting place, which we're going to talk about in part 2, and how it reflects something that was specific to me. But it's also known for, well, I didn't realize this, but after doing more research, it's actually known for some of the most UFO alien activity of anywhere in America. This is frost from people's windows. My sister sent me the one on the right, on her window, which looks like a heart. This lady sent me this. Her husband is a hunter, and they put the organs into outside in a bucket. And when she came in the morning, she saw that little deer face had appeared in the ice with the blood. This heart formed because I was cutting my finger. I cut my finger by accident, and so I just squeezed some drops of blood into the water, and you can see down below it designed a heart. And my daughter said, "Oh, it's designed that because you're so loving, Mummy." And I thought that was really sweet. I just thought this was so cute, and I had to turn it around because I like faces. These are different kinds of frosts that freeze. So I get sent all kinds of things like this all the time. But the really strange one is the one to the right, because it's very unusual. The one in the middle is a rose. So I had put the water into, the flowers were in a little kind of container of water. I took some of that water and it designed the flowers. They kind of resemble some of the other organic patterns that on either side. So it's hard to tell, but my sister sent me this. She has a bath outside, and it created this ginormous hexagon. This is a frozen dewdrop. Don't see it every day. Now, this lady, Pascal, she's a French photographer, and she takes photos of rivers and streams. And what's interesting is that she's seeing faces and imagery in it similar to me. So you can see the face peering out in the right, the bird in the middle, and the face on the left. Now, of all of the images that people see as far as animals go, the most common are birds and horses. This photo was sent to me by a lady who had gone to a cenote in Mexico, and you can see the face in the water reflections, but you can also see very clearly that it says "you." The cenote was named after a woman that drowned many years ago. This was sent to me, it looks like an American Indian man. This is really kind of cool. So this lady sent it to me. Apparently some elderly people have a bird bath and it was cold and they were worried that the birds wouldn't have any fresh water. So in the morning they went out to kind of make sure that the water was still liquid. And when they got to it, it was pretty amazing. So some of you may have known this one and some may not, but I think it's another form of being able to understand that there is intelligence in fluids. So I've often wondered if, what would be the most naturally informed water, and I thought it would be amniotic fluid, but since that's not readily available, I thought, well, the next best thing might be eggs. So when you crack open an egg and you look at egg white, there's two parts to the egg white. There's the gloopy gelatinous part, which we're probably very familiar with, and then there's the thinner saliva-like part. So when you crack the egg just a little bit and let that thin part drop out, it's a little bit like saliva. When you freeze that part, what you find is that it will create 6 patterns if it is free range and fresh. Caged hen eggs can only form 2 of the more rudimentary patterns of the 6. It seems, apparently, I'm the first person that's done this, so I've named the 6 patterns because I can. This is the difference between free-range eggs and caged hen eggs. So I did this interesting test because I've done thousands of these, so I've seen 6 patterns consistently, and caged hen eggs consistently only form up to 2 of the patterns. So when I first did this, I was inspired by the work of Luc Monteneur. So some of you may have heard of him, and I'll probably talk about him a little bit afterwards. But he basically took 2 chest tubes of water. Now, just to give him some kind of context, he won the Nobel Peace Prize for discovering AIDS. He's a very serious scientist, sadly passed away not long ago, and got heavily criticised for his work with water, because it seemed too extraordinary. So he had 2 test tubes of water. Then he put them into a copper coil and exposed it to a 7 hertz frequency. They were also exposed to natural light or ambient light. In one test tube there was a sequence of DNA, and in the other one there was nothing. After 17 hours, he put a powder that's a precursor to see if there's any DNA into the tube of water that had nothing in it originally, and found a same sequence of DNA. They call it DNA teleportation. That's pretty mind-blowing, because then you start to wonder what's going on just by sitting next to people. But so I've seen similar things with tap water, where I have tap water in a glass sitting next to spring water. I do the crystallography, leave them overnight. I see that both improve. Tap water improves structurally. Sometimes the tap water even improves with its pH going up. And the spring water also improves. So what I wanted to see is if I put a free-range egg next to a caged hen egg, will they influence each other? Will anything happen? So the very first one I did, I just put them beside each other, left them overnight, and then did the crystallography in the morning. And what I saw was that the free-range egg looked beautiful as per usual, but the caged hen egg, after seeing thousands of them and never seeing them improve or have any more complex structures than 2, I noticed it had started to form complex patterns that looked like free-range eggs. So I posted it on social media, and people were like, yeah, that's cool, but what if you surround it? with bad eggs. It'll definitely go bad. I'm like, I don't know if it will. Well, let's find out. So I did it twice. So I put a free-range egg in the center and surrounded it by cage 10 eggs. These are my controls. And what we saw at the end from the result was that the free-range egg in the middle looked exactly like I would expect, those big volcanoes, but there was healing by proximity. The cage 10 eggs that surrounded it improved to such a degree that some literally looked like free-range eggs. The ones further away improved, but not as significantly. Again, this is the second test, did exactly the same thing. These are the controls. I used the same batch of cage 10 eggs for each test. And we can see that, again, we see the same result. So I think that nature is looking to improve rather than downgrade, especially in the embryonic stage. It doesn't make sense that things should get worse. And I also think that information transfer is possible because water is a type of liquid antenna, and it's an egg white or egg albumin is approximately 90% water. And given that none of the eggs were fertilized, it's fascinating that information was still transferred to the cage 10 eggs, maybe meaning that the potential for life was there from the beginning, kind of that whole chicken and egg thing. So my takeaway is that by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. There are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. If we heal ourselves, we heal others. This is an interesting little side note about eggs. So there was a doctor called Alex Carroll, and he began an experiment where he was culturing tissue from an embryonic chicken heart in a Pyrex flask of its design. And he supplied the culture with nutrients regularly and mentioned it for over 20 years long. Well, basically, what he did, I missed on 2 o'clock in the morning probably writing that. So basically what he did was he constantly fed and changed the culture. He kept the environment clean where the cells were. So he was able to keep those cells alive for up to 20 years. It probably would have kept going, but he died. So he's suggesting that cells are not meant to die, but if you keep the environment pure where they are, they should actually keep living. A lot of people ask me, have you done anything with tears? But I've also done stuff with saliva. So this is interesting, because I've done all kinds of fluids over the last 10 years of doing this work. So I would spit into a dish after I'd said something or spoken something, and then I would freeze the saliva. And often if you spit, you're going to see bubbles on top of those bubbles. What I just saw were designs relative to what I liked. So I had been talking about the number 8 to a friend, and that was the last sentence I'd spoke before I, unladylike, spat dish. And you can see that number 8 is stamped into the bubble. Well, this is interesting because that gives some credence to the idea of how powerful words are, and your saliva is holding that resonance of the last word you spoke. So when you drink or eat, we'll keep it specific to water. So when you're about to drink water, you are the welcoming committee. Your saliva is the first liquid that water touches or comes into contact with before, as you drink it into your body. So it picks up on what you say. So when you're grateful for, you say a prayer or a blessing or something of gratitude, that is still resonating in your mouth. Now you think about kissing. When you're on the fence about somebody and you're like, oh, I don't know, he seems really nice or she seems nice, but the intelligent fluid of your body is so intuitive and it's picking up on information your mind isn't. So that first kiss is going to tell you more about how you feel, resonate, and connect with that person than your mind ever will. That's how you know. I really like this person. Yeah, or maybe not for me. So that saliva exchange is actually sharing very intimate information about you. Tears are interesting, so we see very different results with different types of tears. Onion tears are chemical tears. They're created from a reaction to onions. So it designed the iris of my eye. With different tears, you can see there's some commonality, but they vary. So the tears of relief, I think, are really interesting because they do form quite a complex, beautiful pattern. And laughing tears are bigger, they're wider. Tears of grief, they're very interesting too. Relief is a big one for people. Sometimes when we're holding so much tension and we think suddenly all of a sudden we're happy, often that happiness is relief. So I did a survey not long ago where I asked people, what does this image look like to you? And 1,000 people did the survey. I know maybe some people in here did it. I had to cap it. It kept going up and up and up. But what I'm going to show you are the two most extreme results. So I had to put the first one into 3 categories. Adults who compared the image to something they associated with in the world, which was a surprisingly large amount of people. Adults who intuitively explained what they thought it looked like, and children under 7. So I started with this image, and this is from the people who associate this symbol with things that were in the world. Wi-Fi was number 1, Illuminati number 2, radio waves, EMF, New World Order, control, spiderweb, prison, pyramid, manipulation. Now why might they have had that idea? Because it looks similar to this. And a lot of us don't want to think that that might have been us thinking that. Now, this is from people who intuited what it meant. Energy, golden rays, pyramid energy, emanation, connect, fuzzy, happy, positive, free, expansive. Okay, so what did the children under 7 say? A growing shape, I feel tickly. I feel nice energy and see lines from the sun. Makes me feel normal. Looks like my nana in heaven. Feels happy. Feels warm and tickly. Tickly keeps coming up. I hear a buzzing sound. I feel like running and feel happy. Like the water when I throw a stone and it makes me feel happy. The children really understood the assignment because they told me what it made them feel like. And they didn't say anything about EMF or Wi-Fi. So here's a picture of free energy. It has a little electrical charge in there too, and we actually often see that. The two tend to go hand in hand. So we go back to the extreme. So 98% of people, including children, said the same thing for this image. Probably can guess what maybe it was. Magic, or magic wand. So either everyone was making an association with this picture, or maybe magic is something we all subconsciously remember. That is something connected to a line or a staff and a star or light. So could the rod be the spine and the star be awakened Kundalini energy? When the Kundalini energy reaches the pineal gland, people frequently experience photonic effects. This activation is claimed to give a person magical powers, which in Tantric Buddhism are called siddhis. They are clairvoyance, levitation, biolocation, astral projection, materialization, and having access to memories of past lives. This is not to offend anyone, this is just simply observations, and all of my work is observations. I'm a researcher and a lover of water, so I like to share things that I find. But in early Christian art, I just found this interesting. Jesus looks rather different, performing miracles, than in later depictions. So frescoes of Jesus were rediscovered in the catacombs on the Via Anapo in Rome, dating back to the second half of the 3rd century AD. So they depict themes taken from the Old and New Testaments. So here Jesus uses a staff to resurrect Lazarus. You see it again where he's performing miracles. And again here we see that the staff or rod is directing and focusing energy, and given that Jesus said he was the light, what we're seeing here is light directed through a staff. This is an anomaly. So when I said the word Yeshua, I actually can't explain how this happened. I know very well how to do crystallography. So this was done in the morning. There was no bright lights. It was just, this is what happened as an anomaly on my camera. When I took other photos, it didn't look like this. But we can't forget Magdalene. We had another very unusual light anomaly here. It looks like oil, an oil slick with these beautiful patterns. But I did have a dark background for this, but I can't explain how this happened on my camera. So we'll get back to magic wands. So, the staff of Moses. There's a dowser from 10,000 years ago up there. And dowsing is another form of light held within staff. And we can see all the rest, the rod of Ecclesiastes, and the caduceus, Aaron's rod. So this is me. This was when I was here last year and I got to go to Dartmoor, and I have an affinity for stones. And you can see in this photo I'm holding some dowsing rods and that were lent to me. And so I used that photo and showed it to Water, and you can see that my hand is there holding the dowsing rods. But you might notice above it something that we've already seen, which is the electrical charge glyph, and there's 2 of them, maybe even 3 of them. So we're seeing that electrical charge is coming out of the rods. This is an unassuming magic wand that can write and rewrite history. But nothing can happen unless you hold it. We are light, using a staff. Here's another one. So is water consciousness, my consciousness, affecting the water? Well, how do we take our consciousness away from being the observer? That's actually very hard. So I started to write words which I had no picture image of, that were concepts. So the word ego is a concept. It's not something you can go and buy at the store. So water absorbed the energy of this concept and designed a person with giant shoulders, a little face, and a big balloon head. Grief, I could have thought of tears, I could have thought of a broken heart, but I didn't think of a person with holes throughout their chest. Free energy, you can see. Artificial intelligence, it's very unusual. This was liquid water when it went in. Okay, so I used dreams. I was like, when am I not consciously impacting the water in my awake stage? What will happen if I put a petri dish of water beside my bed with the intention that it captures some part of my dream? I sleep in darkness, so this was also done in the dark. And when I'd wake up, what I did was, if you know how you remember, you know you've dreamt, and it's just like right there, and you try to grasp it, and the faster you try to grasp it, the quicker it goes. That was when I would use that water. If I remembered the dream, I wouldn't use it, because if I remembered it, I could be projecting. So what I would do was put that dish into the freezer and pull it out, and the imagery from dreams was sometimes clearer than any of the imagery I used in my waking state or saw in my waking state. What was fascinating is that the image was so clear that it would jog my memory of the whole dream, and then I would record it all down. So here are just some examples. So the first one is of a sailboat, and I was dreaming about being in big waves in a sailboat. The second one was I was staying on a farm, and there were lots of sheep, and I was dreaming about sheep. And the other one was when I was walking on a railway track. So, how can water accompany me through the dream time? It obviously isn't limited to certain realms, but how can it do that? It's like an observer. It's accompanying me. I think the more spiritual aspect of water is actually the observer, never in judgment. We're going to talk about the Maori aspect of the word spirit, which means wairua, which means wairua means spirit. Wai means water, rua means two. It means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. So a lot of people ask me, well, what can you project a thought from far away? So there was a friend of mine who lives in the States, and I said to her, look, I've got a petri dish of water here, can you think of something, don't tell me what it is, and project it? And then we were on FaceTime, and her husband, who I hadn't met, they were newly married, came over and gave me a wave, and I said, I know this is going to sound really, really, really weird, but could you get him to do it? Because I don't really know much about him, and I thought it might be fun, and so he was a good sport, thought I was probably crazy, and said, yeah, okay. And so he projected a thought from America all the way to New Zealand into my little petri dish. And he thought of something I would never think of because I'm vegetarian and have been since I was 8. And he was a hunter, and he was actually on his way to go pheasant shooting. He was thinking about that. And if you can see where the hand is, if you look up, it's like a little pheasant head with the tail coming down. This one beside it was a friend of mine in India, and she's had a fear of water her whole life, to the degree that she only has bucket showers, which is when you stand in a bucket and you kind of tip it over your head. And she would never go into an area where she had to go into water. And so she had been going to therapy, and I'd asked her to project a thought. She'd been going to therapy, and her therapist said, you need to start just by imagining yourself in a body of water. So what she did was imagine that she was in the Ganges, because she thought, well, if I'm going to die, at least I'll die in the Ganges, because she's a Hindu. And so she was imagining that she was standing in the Ganges with her head above water, and that's what she projected into the ice from India. So you can kind of see a body with the water line up against her neck. Now I'm going to tell you a love story. So, to the water conference in 2019, I took this photo. So you can see a heart there. Up the top you can see a little plane. And I thought, oh, water's just telling me that I'm going to be going on a trip. Oh, that's really sweet. Well, when I went to the water conference, I met my husband there. And we had this wonderful connection. And before we had really connected, he came to me on day 2 or something, and he said, I've got something really weird to show you. And I'm like, I like weird. And he said, oh, and he was obviously nervous to show me, so he got his phone out, and he showed me a picture, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And I had been talking about my work, and one of the images that you've all seen today is my initials that were in the ice. And so he is a very honest person. And this obviously mystified him, and he kind of was freaking out a little bit about it, maybe more than I would have done. And so he was, this always sounds bad, but I don't know how else to say. He was in the shower, and he was grabbing something outside of the shower, and there was the mirror. And he looked at the mirror, and he was like, he had another look, and then he took a photo. And it might have just been the way the woman had cleaned the mirror, but you can see that the steam has actually created my initials. And he said, "What do you think it means?" I'm like, "Well, what do you think it means?" And the rest is history. So can water be deceived? Now, some of you may have seen my interview with Pam Gregory. Great, just about to stop. And where I basically, this was years ago, and I would never do this now, and I said to the water, because somebody said, "Can you deceive water? Can you trick it?" Which seems like a kind of weird thing to think, but anyway, fair enough. And so I said to the water, "Can you design something really amazing for me and just be between you and me, and I won't share it with anyone?" And I was lying. I was going to share it on social media. And I felt really guilty because I knew I was lying, and I would normally never do that. But anyway, I put it into the freezer and pulled it out. And I was a little bit taken aback by what I saw. So you'll see that there is disordered crystallography, of which I would have expected, of course. Not that I should expect anything when it comes to water, but you might be able to make out the N and the O. That was a clear sign that water was not going to take part in deception. And I think that's really important, because when you look at the work of Tesla and Victor Schauberger and many others that have found ways to do good things in the world, and their work has been taken at the end to be used for negative things, what I see in water is that it will not resonate at a lower frequency. So I think this is such good news. Such good news. And that is the end of... So part 2, we have all the ancient civilization stuff. You've got my story coming up. We're Atlantis, Lemuria, pyramids, Göbekli Tepe. We have a lot to cover, and I've put a lot of energy into it, so I'm excited to share that with you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
If you can all be back here by 1:45, that would be great.